I was studying Chinese Polestar Astrology simply to understand space and time. I always had more of an interest in medicine because, silly me, I thought that medicine and astrology were distinct, but they're not really. Now I understand that. So I studied just to try to understand what the body was. Like, what is the body but a recording of time, but a recording of chi?
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological. Patients frequently ask me, what did you put on those needles? They think that surely I've injected something into their body because they experienced something significant while resting on the treatment table. They're always surprised to hear that there is nothing on the needle, that the needle does nothing more than call forth a capacity that they didn't know they had. That nothing from the outside was introduced, but rather something unseen and unnamed was stirred. I assure my patients that what they are feeling is something they can take with them because it is them. This is news to many, that they have a capacity for which they were unaware, that there is something latent or slumbering that is trustworthy, even if it cannot be named. It's a surprise to consider that the body is not suspect and broken, but rather capable in ways unimagined. That they might be bigger than the story that they've been telling themselves. That beyond their understanding is something reliable, untamed, and perhaps untamable. I wouldn't call it shadow material. It's more like undeveloped potential. There's something about it that's potent. It's curious for patients to feel connected to something that they don't usually consider as themselves, and yet is a part of the bedrock of who they are. And especially as through most of our lives, we've been told how the body is unreliable and untrustworthy. And we learn to diminish what we have and instead focus on what we don't, as we hypnotically watch commercial after commercial, pointing out our brokenness and our flaws. Acupuncture has a way of reconnecting us with our capacity, the potential in the Jing, the courage of the gallbladder, the discernment and capacity of the motion through metal that sifts value from dross. Acupuncture doesn't add anything. It simply calls forth latent capacity, and I suspect it touches something primordial that we can't grasp with the thinking mind, but we can attend to from the deep, connective water of our being. Everyone has particular talents, places in life where it seems they have a VIP pass. And then there are those areas of life where it seems we're out of phase. We can't quite catch a break. We go from one challenge to another and still easily lose our footing. We might feel gifted or we might feel broken, but so often our challenges are tied to the lessons that we most need to learn. And as a patient of mine likes to say, school's always in session. In this Chinese New Year conversation with Anne Shelton Crute, we discuss Polestar Astrology and how it can be helpful in glimpsing the longer waves of influence that run through our lives, how it can be useful in giving some perspective to our patients' conditions and their challenges. And finally, we talk about this upcoming Yang Water Tiger Year. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Of course, the stars are not destiny, but they tell a story that can help us to understand destiny and our free will. Let's get into this conversation now with Anne. Anne Shelton Crute, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. You have your hands, to some degree, actually I guess a fair degree, into this thing called Polestar Astrology. And I don't know that much about the Chinese astrology methods. I know that I spent some time in Taiwan. There's all kinds of fortune tellers there that'll be around temples and using all kinds of really interesting modes of helping you swan ming, check your fortune. And I also know that you have worked quite a bit with a fellow who's no longer with us, Liu Ming, who's an interesting character, and I'd like to speak with you about him as well. So I'd love to begin where I often begin with these conversations, which is, how did a nice girl like you from Virginia get involved with Chinese medicine?
Such a good question. Yeah. Chinese medicine and traditional medicine of Asia was flirting with me from very, very early in my life. I can remember being absolutely fascinated by the, Asian art section of the local museum that I would frequent, as my mother would take me to as a child, and just really could tell there was something different about the viewpoint there. that I didn't have access to learning anything about really until I left home and went off to college and went away and got to explore some other things. Um, and then Chinese medicine in specific became interesting to me when I was living in New York City. I was there. I just graduated from college when 9/11 happened, and I lived in the East Village, quite close. And I was actually even closer when it happened in the West Village. And I saw a lot of things that day. And I was very close to St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could look down from the apartment and I could see the line of donors, people wanting to donate blood and help, literally wrapping around the block as people tried to find a way to help out in the midst of an ongoing devastating situation. And in that time, the power went out, phones went out, and it just became very clear to me that industrial medicine, we needed to make sure that as a society that we don't have all our eggs in one basket. That industrial medicine has a lot to offer, but it also presents a lot of problems. And at that time, I was an avid practitioner of yoga, was studying Southeast Asian philosophy, Ayurveda a little bit, but mostly just practicing yoga for myself because it felt good. And then, and when this happened, I thought, okay, we need to find out how to preserve the traditional ways of knowing our world, because if we lose the mechanistic ways of understanding our world, then we will be quite lost.
I love that phrase, preserving the traditional ways of knowing our world. It just kind of lands for me in so many ways. And it sounds like 911 for you was truly a catalytic moment.
It was funny that day. I'd gotten back doing some global travel right after I'd graduated from college. And I literally was holding my resume in my hand and I was about to hit the town to figure out what I was going to do after college that morning when I heard the airplane fly right over the apartment building. I was saying goodbye and about to head out the door and hit the town and decide to figure out who I was going to become or what I was going to do. Couldn't like kick around Europe anymore, couldn't delay. So yeah, I mean, it was a tragedy, of course, and it was very difficult to watch that many people die with my bare eyes. But it also, well, I mean, back to the subject of Polestar astrology, I'm a horse. And so in challenging circumstances, it's like, okay, what do we do? What's the work that's required here? You know? So
Mm-hmm.
I think for my character, it was not too destabilizing. It was a call to action.
So in a catastrophe, you want to have some horses around.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, when I think of astrology, I often think of destiny. It's kind of a loaded word, destiny, such a big thing. But, we talk about it some in our work. And the various astrologies, I think, all talk a bit about destiny. Like, what do you got and where might you take it to? Something like that. I'd love to know more about where Polestar astrology comes from. How does it fit into our world of, I'm going to say, Chinese philosophical thought and Chinese medicine for that matter? Because again, when I was in Taiwan, there were doctors that would look at a person's chart as part of understanding who they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like where does it come from? Where does it fit in that pantheon of thought that we call Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine?
Oh, destiny, right. Destiny. Destiny is an interesting concept because it's so rejected in the West. And I think that that's because it's a misunderstanding. It's almost a mistranslation of what's really meant by the Chinese. So Chinese Polestar Astrology is a Song Dynasty technology that measures fate, destiny, but not only fate, also free will and also character. So those are the three subject matters that we're really looking at when we're talking about Polestar.
Fate, free will, and character.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm.
So to the normal contemporary Westerner, they may hear fate and free will, and there's going to be like the sound of a crash in the brain
Hmm.
because it doesn't really make sense that fate and free will can coexist. Aren't they mutually exclusive? But across Southeast Asia, and not Southeast Asia, but Asia on the whole, most of the philosophies recognize fate and free will as not being mutually exclusive, that we have a portion of fate and we also have free will. We can bootstrap ourselves in certain realms of our life, and we have power to make decisions in some aspects of our life, and we're very fated in others. This can feel good, like, oh, I'm born into a family of artists and I'm an amazing artist. Or it can feel difficult, like, oh, I'm born into a family of a specific genetic disease and I have to work very hard to prevent myself from getting that genetic disease. But that right there, the work very hard to not, that right there is the interaction between fate and free will, right?
Hmm.
Same with the positive example. If you're born into a family of artists, you still have to like sit down and put in the hours with the violin and do all the scales, get to just miraculously do it, although you may have a proclivity.
You really don't. My wife's niece lives with us. She's from China.
Mm.
So she's kind of like bicultural. She surprises me all the time with what she has to say. And we were talking, this was a few years ago, we were talking about talent. And she said, yeah, when you've got talent, you have to work harder. And I'm like, okay, let's just check your English here. And asked her to explain. She goes, yeah, well, if you have talent because you're good at something, you're going to lean on that talent. And that's why you have to work harder, because otherwise your talent will not come all the way out. If you lean on that thing you were just talking about, that you're kind of good at it naturally, then it won't express itself all the way.
That's an interesting view. So, Chinese Polestar Astrology shows us where we have a strong capacity to push into something
Mm.
and apply a yang activity kind of approach. Half of the stars are yang in nature, half of the stars are yin in nature. But then there are other areas where you don't really have to push, where,
Mm.
where you really can trust and sit back. In our grind culture, it's a little hard for us to respect or recognize that yin power. It's often viewed as manipulative, or why did that person get that leg up, when in fact that can be an expression of yin power that the person was born with through ancestral causes or through past life causes. The language changes in Polestar because there's an influence of Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism. So Chinese view resists this didactic kind of teaching of, well, this is what reality is. Chinese view has this idea of, okay, well, this works from this tradition, let's use it, let's keep it.
Hmm.
And that works from this tradition, let's use it, let's keep it. We don't know how they all fit together perfectly. It's not always neat and tidy. And the Song Dynasty court environment was so open-minded, it was so well resourced that they were really able to bring in, they had travelers from all over the world. It must have been something like Paris in the 1920s, or
Hmm.
New York City in the 80s, or I don't know, where there was like all kinds of people from all over the place checking it out and sharing what it's like where they're from. And China just sort of absorbed it all and took what worked. And that's how Chinese Polestar Astrology developed. It uses the math from the Persian and the Indian traditions. It maintained remnants of older tribal traditions. Some of the constellations Ken Ming used to teach could no longer even, or can no longer be seen in the night sky. They're so old. This tradition rests on such ancient traditions, and yet, in terms of the astrology that we have today, it's a newer one. Song Dynasty, that's not that long ago.
Hmm. Pretty recent.
But then they reformulated it to reflect this uniquely Chinese worldview. So it's secular and it's spiritual. It recognizes the six realms of being, but it roots it in the human experience. It recognizes the importance of rites and rituals, acknowledging gods and ghosts and demons and etc. But it's interested in our human experience and our community and our ancestors, our placement within our ancestral stream. and our particular unique representation of that for our family.
I'm really curious about what you just said there with the ancestral energy and like where we are in our ancestral stream. Especially here in the West, we like to think, oh, I'm an individual. I've got a family, but yeah, whatever. We'll often look at the people of Asia and especially watch some of the rituals with what we, I think, often pejoratively call ancestor worship and miss that there is something that comes down through the people who have lived, that comes down to us. There's something of their experience that, had it not been successful for them, we wouldn't be here. And so I'm curious to know more about that aspect of it.
Well, clearly the ancestors are very important in Chinese thought, right?
Mm.
And when we look at our bodies, here we are, we're Chinese medicine practitioners at root, right? So we're working with our body mind total experience, and like where can we point to in our bodies and our experience and know, where can we point to that's not coming from our parents? And yet one of the things that Polestar can help us with is this conundrum of, but aren't I an individual? What if I don't have strong fate to be living with my family or having strong fate with my parents, with my siblings? And the Chinese Polestar chart can really show us where those ancestral gifts might be rooted in other houses. So for some people, if you have a really strong house of career, for instance, and the old name for the house of career is actually the travel palace, not the career palace, the travel palace. There's so many translation issues that come up. And, I was fortunate when I studied with Liu Ming to watch him design and redesign and redesign. I can think of like at least twice where he would play with what he wanted to call the stars, how he wanted to translate the stars, and even how he wanted to translate the houses themselves. So a chart that would have been inauspicious in the old world in China, which would have maybe an exalted career palace, would be very auspicious today. It would mean, oh, look at this chart. And a mother would be very proud. My child's going to fly all over the world and, work in all these different places and see all these different people and all these ways of life and get to go far from home, which in the old world, that's an exile chart. That's an ancestral curse, right? So our context is very important. I think that's one of the things that Liu Ming was very deft at, was understanding how to translate for Westerners, how to really appreciate and recognize the Western experience. But I think he also appreciated a broad scope of the Chinese view and could even see its connection from way back in antiquity all the way up to more cosmopolitan Chinese ways. He could see that through line and he could help bridge and interpret those two. So it's not an obstacle, the ancestor thing. To answer your question, it's not an obstacle. And sometimes our karmic issues with our family come out in the public sphere. Some people's charts, they've got tons of energy on the more community side, career side, property, palace, assistants, bosses, work in the world. And other people are working out their karma in the home sphere, on the home side of the chart, family, marriage, children, etc. So it's almost, sometimes Ming would say that we're working with our ancestors, but our ancestors are possessing. Let's see, how would he say it? Sometimes Ming would say our ancestors are almost possessing those people who are not our family. So we're working with our family even when we're not.
This sounds a little bit like modern family systems psychotherapy. A little bit. This idea that there are certain patterns that we inherit from our family. They truly come through our family line and the ways that relationships were worked out or not worked out over time. That comes down to us as a kind of inheritance. And then we recreate those relationships out in the world. It's curious to see how these different ways of looking at the world are pointing toward a similar, I don't want to call it an energetic dynamic, but kind of a Actually, I want to come back to Ming. I want to come back to life. I want to come back to destiny. I suspect when you talk about destiny, you're talking about the character Ming. Is that correct? It's often translated that way.
It is. I'm not going to be great with translating Ming for you right now, but I'm not sure is going to be the answer to that one.
Okay, well, fair enough.
I have that somewhere. I can't speak on that in this moment.
Okay. Ming, I think, is one of these really curious characters because we can look at it as something as simple as life. It means life in a certain way, but it also is like life, as I understand it. My Chinese is not great, okay? But it has that aspect of not just life, but like what you do with it and what it does to you and where you might go through this journey from, birth to death. It has that kind of a flavor.
Well, that larger flavor of where destiny takes us is one of the things that I think relates to Polestar's application to clinical practice.
Mm.
Because with an understanding of where our life has emphasis, I like to talk about it with my clients as sort of like we have this big pizza. And like our chart is this pizza, and the character part, that's sort of the animals, the Chinese restaurant menu placemat when you go to the Chinese restaurant, right? With all the animals on it. That part is the character. And so the character that you are dictates the way that you're going to meet that destiny. So say your life is a pizza. Well, the crust, is it gluten-free or is it wheat? Does it have a marinara sauce or a white sauce? What's happening with that? Like underneath all of the slices, that's the character, So a dragon is going to meet their destiny in a much different way than like a rabbit, okay? Or a snake, barnyard animals. Then if you look at all of the slices, there might be a disproportionate amount of pepperoni over on this slice, and there might be almost no pepperoni on the other ones or on some over here. And so this shows us where we have more fate and more free will. And so when we run into an issue in our lives, when we have something going on, say an illness, it's very empowering to know where your power is, to look at the life and go, okay, did I go straight for the piece with all the pepperoni that looked delicious when I first opened the box? Or did I think, I don't know, maybe I should have ordered Chinese? Do we like try to change our chart, and do we try to like add peppers and onions and olives over on another piece over here, which is fine, that you can express your freedom, but that's what free will is. You can eat that slice that has less pepperoni, but if you go toward where that pepperoni is, it'll really help. So when is a headache a headache? When is it a medical condition? Versus when is it a karmic disturbance? When is it a disrelationship to time, disrelationship to the ancestors? These are all words for the same thing. So that means that the way out of illness might not be in the doctor's office. The way out of illness for some people might be to go ahead and engage deeper. Like, go ahead and start school, move, open the business, start the family, marry the partner, whatever it is. And I see a lot of people who have very serious illness come into clinic and they just want to stop everything until they feel okay and then try to start their lives. It's like they're trying to stop life, heal, and then start life. And again, grind culture, sometimes we do need to slow down, but other times it means sometimes that headache, if you're giving the right headache herbs and the right headache herbs aren't working, then it's a fate problem masquerading as a medical condition. Yeah, so Polestar can show you, okay, call your brother. That's where your power is. They're going to have an answer for you. Oh, but I don't like to talk to my brother. Well,
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I love this idea. And you alluded to this earlier, that there are some people, it looks so unfair. Like things go so easy for them. They get these jobs, they got these positions. There's certain things, it just comes to them. You were alluding to this earlier. You were talking about it as a yin power. Very provocative thought. Maybe we can talk more about that later. What I take from this is that, and I've seen this in my clinical practice too, there are resources people have. And there are deficiencies people have. I see it in my life. I see it in my patients. Of course, I see it in my family. That's a really easy place to look because you're familiar. No pun intended. It's really helpful to know that you've got a strength and, hey, now's a good time to pull that out and use it. And it's really helpful at other times to know, hey, there's a weakness here. And instead of depleting myself further, maybe I need to pull some strength in. It's good to know the character of your resources. I think that's helpful. And I love this idea that there are some things that are medical and we can deal with it medically. And then there's other things. It's like, yeah, you probably do need to quit your job because it's eating your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And how to know when to do which one, how to know which answer is true. That's tricky. Sounds like Polestar is helpful for this.
Sometimes the difficulty someone may be experiencing might not be a lack of yin stars allowing you to just sit back and receive. Sometimes there's a disrelationship between the chart and the circumstances. Let's see if I can think of an example of this relationship between the chart and the circumstances. Okay, sometimes there's a disrelationship between the chart and the circumstances, such as a time when actually I was in clinic with Bob Levine, and one of his patients came in and she had this terrible eczema case. It was very uncomfortable. I mean, we all know how difficult eczema can be in clinic, right? And she was on all the right herbs and she was getting some results, but they were never really quite sticking. And I'd been working with Bob Levine for a long time and I looked at her chart and I realized what year she was born. So I realized what animal she was. And I realized that we were in the year of that animal for her,
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, so she's probably feeling pushed to the brink because the external environment has so much, I think it was rooster year, has so much rooster energy. And she had so much rooster energy, but she hadn't like actualized a certain thing. So for her, it was more of a case of being caught between social conditions and her chart. So this woman was late 40s and she'd been a career woman, but she was having this whole culturally inherited experience of subtle shame around, well, why didn't I get married and have a family? Even though it was a very clear and conscious choice that she felt very happy about on one level. But on another level, she was taking in all this social toxicity around not being enough as a woman. And she was kind of in this perimenopausal place of, well, gosh, it really is too late, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember chatting with her about her chart and what came up for her in feeling caught between career and family. She kind of avoided going ahead and writing the book that she wanted to write.
Oh.
Well, roosters are very smart and discriminating. And this was a rooster year, like a really good time to put your intellect to work. And so she started working on the book. And her eczema got better. You know what I mean? So, of course, the medical care that she was receiving was excellent. She still needed the medical care. She still needed the support, but it wasn't just a medical issue. And so that was a case where it was yang power. It was go ahead and engage. And, character can't be underestimated. If you have a very strong chart for being out in the world, but it's 1950 and you're a woman and you're in the Midwest and you're stuck at home with small children, that can create a tremendous amount of pressure and frustration, difficulty. Whereas if you're like a dragon, whereas perhaps if you're a rabbit, you just might convert that into networking with the community. So there are always ways. I mean, these examples are kind of the last two examples I gave were just sort of caricatures. The other one is a real case where someone was able to make a pretty easy change, easy in that didn't require any great amount of resources. She was just able to like sit down, make a decision, and start to plod forward on her dreams. But she was feeling that difficulty and feeling empowered to do so.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary. Raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. So it really helps when we know who we are in the circumstance in which we find ourselves. That's like 2 points working in our favor. Mm-hmm. Who am I in this situation? Can you tell us a bit more about the architecture of the Polestar? You were referring to, I think you said palaces. I know in Western astrology they talk about houses, talking about palaces, and you were talking about the palace of travel, also being the palace of work. Loved that perspective that at one point in time, a lot of energy in the palace of travel is the exile chart. Ooh, bad juju. Another point in time, it's like, ooh, world traveler, lucky you. And it also makes me think, too, I think about, exile, too bad for them, bad deal. It's like, well, actually, maybe great deal. Traveler, new experience. Outside the realm of what you grew in, also is a tremendous opportunity, for learning and expression and all kinds of things. So I suspect that exile versus travel, yes, it has something to do with the times, but it also carries both of those energies. Even if you're delighted to be traveling all over the place, you might miss home a bit at some point. So all of that's in the mix. So tell us more about the palaces. What are we looking at?
So we're still looking at 12 houses or palaces. That those names are interchangeable. As you would see in Jyotish astrology or Western astrology, their meanings are a little bit different. It's kind of like having 12 slices of that pizza I was talking about earlier. And one of the things that the sages did when they took all the math from these other traditions and reformulated and cooked a Chinese view into that math. And it's more math than it is astrology. In fact, Ming would teach us directly to nearly apologize for the word astrology. It doesn't really have much of a place in it. He said this is just more like a certain way of using the abacus. And throughout history, the people with the big abacus were the ones who knew stuff that you'd want to know. Ming was a strong proponent of the grandmas being great repositories of wisdom and knowing just what food herbs to pull up from what would normally be considered just weeds for a lot of people for nourishing and taking care of basic health. And then at the same time, very high level calculations have their place too. So he would apologize for this idea of it being quote unquote astrology because it's more of a calculation at this point. Yes, they're stars. Yes, they're constellations, but we don't talk about them as such. We talk about them as members of the imperial court. And we're talking about a very high functioning, ideal imperial court in which the emperor is truly sitting in the Tao and able to feel the needs of the country and the needs of the people that depend upon him with the full surrender to his role, not the greedy king kind of image of Europe, which of course us as Americans despise and have rebelled against in our own American history.
Yes, but we also have that mythological image of the good king.
Yes.
Right? We also have the Arthur stories.
Yes.
And the King Arthur legend. So, yes, hierarchy and power, when aligned with the Tao, that brings an order that allows the mandate of heaven to flow.
Absolutely.
And you can take that same structure, and when it's corrupted, oh man, it's a mess. They're both there.
Yeah.
Mm,
So the Chinese chart is using this model for the imperial court
hmm.
where the role of the emperor is one of service,
Yes, yes.
not like beyond personal aspirations or lust or different kinds of greed or being pulled strongly by emotional cravings. you know so and they submitted themselves the to the operations of the court, the work of the other ministers in the court on them. Okay, this is what you need to eat today. We've picked through your poop. We decided that this is the best food for you for the season, etc., so that you can be one with the Tao. Here's the tutor figure coming in. These are different characters in the chart that you see. So, there are, you're asking about the houses. We've got the 12 houses or palaces, and then you've got an emperor, an empress, an oracle, a tutor. Those are the main four stars. There are other ones as well. And I think one of the tricks of understanding the chart, one of the tricks of the reading is understanding the emphasis. The emphasis of those stars make a really big difference.
Tell me those four again, those four influences, the tutor.
So you've got the emperor, and that's the pinnacle of yang. That's your power to do. That's like the wherever that lands, you got to like engage. You got to do something. You can't just sit around and wait for it. And then you got the empress, and that's the yin power, where things kind of naturally resolve on their own. Gifts are given, and we all have all of these stars.
Hmm.
All of the stars, we all have them somewhere. So the empress is where we're receiving the benefit of the merit of our ancestors or our past life actions, depending on how you want to language it. Doesn't really matter. Then there's the tutor, so knowledge, impeccability, conduct, the oracle, where we're kind of half here, half not here, meaning some people learn a great deal through spiritual traditions and get really turned on by them, and other people learn a great deal through playing with their kids or connect spiritually. I mean, connect deeply, learn spiritually through pleasure or through work or through working directly with the land. So the placement of these can show us about that.
Are these four influences also associated with the directions by any chance?
This is just four of the stars. I could keep going. I mean,
Mm.
there's also sun and moon and concubine and all these. It's almost like dollhouse characters, to shift metaphor from pizza to dollhouse.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you've got an emperor and he's standing in the kitchen or the living room, having a more private life or a more public life, that's going to tell us more about the shape of the life. But no matter where all of these stars fall, it's a reconfiguration of the ancestral chi, of the overall larger waveform of the family line.
Family line sounds really important here.
And one of the ways to engage, the main way to engage would be with working directly. If you have the information about your natal chart, then you're working directly with the knowledge of where that, or you don't have to have the knowledge, right? You can also just feel it. You can feel it because it's in all of our appetites. You don't have to be dependent on Chinese astrology, and no one should try to use astrology to game their life. You're not going to get a leg up necessarily by obsessing about all of the intricate details. You can usually just feel exactly where you want to go, or if you don't want to go somewhere, that's interesting too, something to look at, right?
Hmm. Sometimes it's just a reminder for what you kind of already know, but you just need to be reminded of.
Yeah. Then we have progressions. So I can remember one year when I was working in clinic, and one of my colleagues there was covering another colleague's clinic while they were out of town over the holidays. And at this time, their father suddenly seemed to be dying. He was living in a old folks home, and he was kind of food striking, and no one could really convince him to eat. It was a pretty serious situation. And I remember that my colleague was just so torn up about it. She was like, "I'm committed to cover this person's practice. Like, can I wait 3 weeks to go after the other practitioner comes home? What do I do with my client load? But this is my father. My father really seems to be dying. He's been ailing for so many years, and now he's not even eating. This is not good." And this was around the solstice around this time of year. And if she'd waited 3 weeks, it would have been an entirely different year, right? Because of the Lunar New Year falls
Mm-hmm.
usually somewhere mid January through mid February is when that first Lunar New Year moon of the new year arrives. So we took a quick look at her father's chart, and her father's chart showed that he had Emperor in the house of his own children. So, Emperor in the house of his own children, that's where the power was for him to find life again. So, I strongly recommended to her that she get herself back to Kansas or wherever,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get home. All she had to do was walk in the door and he started eating again. She didn't have to do anything. He just needed to be able to exercise the power of his paternity. And then a couple weeks later, all the stars moved, the progression shifted. And I think that his emperor went into, I think, marriage or something. And so this friend's mother was able to encourage him to eat, and he did great after that. So it's funny, we have usually the big picture feeling of the natal chart tells us what we need to know, but also we can dig into the progressions if we get into a really tight spot.
Yeah. I've always loved maps. I don't know why. Just always loved maps. Because they help you navigate. They help you see a territory. Of course, the map is not the territory, but the map can be helpful when you're not quite sure, where am I? And what might be coming up next? Do I keep going in this direction? Or if I want to get to water, should I move in a different direction? So it sounds really helpful that way. I would love to talk with you a bit. This is the Chinese New Year, after all. It's the Spring Festival. I love it. They call it the Spring Festival. Spring begins at the deepest, coldest moment of winter. Love how the Chinese are so capable of recognizing, yep, spring's coming. You can't feel it yet, but it's deep in the earth. It's coming. I'd love to talk with you a bit about this upcoming tiger year, but before we do that, I'd like to hear a little more about Liu Ming. Now, I don't know a lot about him other than some years ago, I kind of binged on some of his lectures. And he always would do a New Year's talk as well. That was kind of mind-blowing. It's the only way that I've got to say it. So I'd love to know a little bit more about Liu Ming, the person, and what you felt like you learned from him. And then we can get into talking about the upcoming tiger year. And do we actually need to buckle up, or is it going to be, what's it going to be like? We'll come up to that in a moment. Tell us a bit about Liu Ming.
I feel so grateful to have known Liu Ming. Gosh, I started studying with him. Actually, the very first class I took with him was Chinese Polestar Astrology at the very, very beginning. And then, of course, I went on to study all kinds of other medicine, dabbled a tiny bit with feng shui, very minimally with him on that, but the medicine, food cures, understanding seasonal qi, because the seasonal qi is so important. Tang shu is was what most people would use. The emperor would commonly use Polestar, but Joe Schmo and normal citizens like you and I, we would use the Tang shu. That's really enough, to be able to.
The Tang Shu. What's the Tang Shu?
The Tang shu meaning the Chinese almanac.
Mm.
And this actually, to step back into your previous question that you had a moment ago about the architecture of the chart and what it tells us about what we are as humans. So we're having this composite experience with no singular soul experience. So it's sort of similar to the way that we see the five spirits in Chinese medicine, the Hun and the Po and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're this lava lamp with different aspects of ourselves sort of coming forward in different moments. So in your Polestar chart, your year and hour forms your character, right? So such was born in a dragon year, but they have a rabbit hour. Wow, that's really different. That forms your character. But the Tong Shu keeps it moving, right? So every single day is a different animal. Like today, as we were recording this, it happens to be a yin earth goat day. So earth goat or goat might feel totally different than another animal. I remember Liu Ming described us as being, quote, whirling chi balls.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've got is you've got your natal year and hour, your character, which is going to feel different and have a different experience of the environmental chi quality hour by hour. And when I say hour, a Chinese moment is a 2 hour window of time, right? 9 to 11 is snake hour, and then 11 to 1 is horse hour. And of course, we know from our Chinese medicine that that also associates with a different zong or fu organ. So it just never stops. The way, whether if we have a compatible and harmonious experience with whatever day or whatever hour it is, it's going to just shift and feel a little bit different. And yet, some animals are a little bit more stable, a little bit more, no pun intended, a little bit more in the barnyard,
Mm.
have a little bit, you know?
Hmm.
So Ming really emphasized that. You asked about Ming. He really emphasized use of the tongshu and really paying attention to what the conditions are. Same as in Chinese medicine when we don't really when we know that we shouldn't eat ice cream if it's midnight on a cloudy day in winter, but maybe if it's noon on a sunny day in summer, it might not be so harmful. So very, very similar. And Ming was such an interesting character. When I met him, he would give his New Year's talks just in his loft, and there'd be maybe, like 10 people there. He was sort of a hermit living in downtown Oakland, but who was he? I don't think anybody really knows. Was he a great Taoist master, or was he a historian, or was he an artist, or was he a comedian, or was he a coyote? I've been asked if he was sane.
Hmm. I could see that. I could see that
He
as a
was
reasonable
absolutely
question.
sane, crystal clear. That guy. He was hard for people to understand because he would defy some of our cultural conditioning around. I can't even remember him teaching this once about how he would defy our cultural conditioning around, what you need to be healthy and happy and functioning. He used to talk about how the current psychology of the time said that you were basically broken if you didn't have either a career or a family. He would laugh about himself and say, I don't really have either, but I'm doing perfectly fine.
Mhm. I like my exile chart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did you meet him?
I was introduced to him through a yoga teacher that I had who was also studying with him.
And this is where you learned your Polestar.
This is where I learned the Polestar, which I never planned to practice. I never wanted to be an astrologer. It just seemed so egotistical. And who would I be to advise anybody about anything, especially something that seems so taboo and woo in our culture? I was studying Chinese Polestar Astrology simply to understand space and time. I always had more of an interest in medicine because silly me, I thought that medicine and astrology were distinct, but they're not really. Now I understand that. So I studied just to try to understand what the body was. Like, what is the body but a recording of time, but a recording of chi, and how to understand what time and space are, but through looking at astrology and looking at how the above and the below interface, because we live here in this middle world. And that interface, we know from medicine, from Chinese medicine, that interface is that's how we define the human. The human is this composite experience of this interface between above and below. We can't live only above, we can't live only below. We have to live in the middle, but we're informed by both of those.
Mm-hmm. Tiandijan.
So I never planned to be an astrologer, but I studied Polestar with him. And then I kind of took a break from that and studied medicine, studied Ayurveda very deeply, and went to India and so forth with that. Studied a lot of Jyotish astrology, just also on this project of studying time and space. Never with the intention of practicing. I never could with Jyotish for sure. But then I came back and studied Polestar again with Liu Ming. And then I started doing case studies, and I did hundreds of case studies, hundreds of them. And I just was in casual communication with Liu Ming about them and looking at the patterns as they arose. And it wasn't until, well, I was already practicing in clinic with acupuncture and I'd start to see prognosis could be informed by the Polestar chart. It would really help me understand, like, okay, when do I need to tell this person that it's going to feel better in springtime versus, okay, this is about management and this is about setting expectations and working with your mind. And this is a way to, some injuries and illnesses provide longevity. They, if you've got a bum knee, then hey, you don't get drafted for war, you know? So these kinds of things could be useful from Polestar. And it wasn't until actually Bob Levine, another one of my mentors, who finally said, "What are you doing? You need to go ahead and bring this out a little bit." So it's funny, but there was no like graduation. There was no
Mm,
piece of
no,
paper
no, no, no,
for it.
no, no. There wouldn't be, would there?
The books are just terrible for it so far. I mean, maybe someone will write something good one day. So I'm just grateful that I got it through word of mouth, teacher to student.
And I love what you
Indeed.
just said. Some illnesses provide longevity. So often people come in and they've got a air quotes problem, and it's terrible, and I have to get rid of this, and this is awful, and my life would be okay if not but for this thing. But sometimes that thing is actually kind of helpful for them. It's about having a different relationship with it. Sounds like Polestar would be helpful for that.
Liu Ming loved to emphasize that the Chinese tradition, its advances in medicine. Now we're talking about Chinese medicine
Mm.
from Ming, not Polestar, right? That Chinese medicine was so advanced because it stopped looking at health as being this invulnerability project. It stopped looking at medicine as something to provide aggressive sort of Titan orientation of strength and endless power and endless progress and endless advance, which is not consistent with the nature of reality. It's what we like in our Western society. It's what we've all imbibed of growing up in these Western conditions. That's what we all have been conditioned to think that success is. But this is not what the Chinese were doing. So the Chinese view used to be like that in our medicine, Ming taught. It used to be save the person, give them the strong medicine. Even if the medicine hurts you for a little while, then you'll just sort of patch it back together after. Oh, if you're too weak for the medicine, then you kind of don't even deserve to be alive. This is the more Western medicine's subtle connotation. If you look at the way treatment is, and a lot of Western biomedical practices is sort of the surrendering the being for the clinging to life
Mm.
and not really always knowing how to care whether the experience of life is intact. Whereas Chinese medicine noticed, okay, our sensitive members of our population have something to contribute. So instead of creating circumstances where only the strong deserve to have a voice or to have space, what can we do to support the sensitive ones, the weak ones? And often the sensitive weak ones have good longevity because they can't abuse themselves. They can't take the same strong medicines. They can't have the same strong lifestyle. They're not going to do as well eating takeout every night. They're not going to do well partying with their friends. They're going to go home and go to bed because they just can't.
Yep, us introverts. I'm thinking here when you talk about that, the contribution of I'm going to call them the sensitive. I don't like the term weak so much, although it's easy to bring that word in. I think about earlier in the conversation as you were talking about the true and upright court, so to speak, who is manifesting the Tao. And there's room for all those voices, and there's room for all these different characters. Every part has a part to play. I think in some ways I've certainly seen this in my practice. Part of my job as a practitioner is to make sure that my patients are in touch with the different parts that they have that all carry something, and in touch with them in a friendly way so that they're capable of receiving what those voices have to say. Thank you for that image. It helps me to clarify a bit the, at times, odd way that I feel I have of working at times. Because sometimes I sit with my patients and there's a part of them that is so tender. It's like they're afraid to even let it be seen. In fact, often they will be hiding it. But it'll show up in these ways and I'll notice it and I get curious about it. It's like, okay, what's this part have to do with what's going on here? So thank you for that reminder that we all have these quieter, more shy parts that do have a voice. And part of our job as healers is to, I think, help that voice be heard. Makes a lot of sense to me.
And character can help with that too. Ming used to like to talk about how when someone has a new child, reading can be helpful for understanding how to parent that child. So if you have a more sensitive character child like a rabbit or a more introverted character like a snake, then you just let them. You let them hang out and hide under mom's skirt a little longer versus having this one size fits all approach to parenting of shoving them out. Well, they're going to have to learn one way or the other, just shove them out there into it. Whereas if you've got a tiger or a dragon kid or certain types of pigs, etc., they're just going to go out there. They're just going to go to the playground by themselves. They're like, I don't need you, mom. I got it. I know. I remember where it is. What? You're 4. I remember when my son was in elementary school and there was this one kid who just decided to walk home. He was done with school. So he went out the doors and he just walked home. And if you talk to any elementary school teacher, they know about the different chi qualities of these different cohorts. And so some of them have greater sensitivity. Some of them are more quiet. Some of them are more aggressive. Some of them are more independent.
I'm going to walk on home.
Yeah.
Well, hey, speaking of tigers,
Hmm.
Tiger Year begins. We're here. This airs on the Chinese New Year. As we're recording this, it's still very close to the Western New Year. People have been writing me Happy New Year, and I've been thinking, yeah, Tiger Year, maybe we should be writing Buckle Up. I don't know. I mean, I don't know a lot about Chinese astrology and all this kind of thing. I mean, I really do have pretty much a Chinese restaurant placemat understanding for the most part. Here we are in a Tiger Year. I mean, is this going to be like ferocious and brutal? It's a water tiger. Or is that going to be more of an internal kind of energy? Can you give us some glimpses of what the year might be like?
I'd love to talk about what the young water tiger year is.
Okay.
This upcoming tiger year is a water tiger year. It's a yang water tiger year.
Yang water. Okay.
So what the Chinese are saying is that there's 12 different types of energy, basically. And if 12 seems too reductionist, too generic, too much like cosmopolitan quiz where you circle A enough times that you get the A outcome, it's like, okay, astrology, I don't know, maybe I can see myself enough in tiger because we all can relate to tiger energy. We can relate to all 12 in a way. But then you multiply each of these 12 energies by the 5 elements, and then suddenly you've got 60, and it becomes a lot less generic. You get a lot more variety.
And then you got yin and yang as well.
Right, and then you've got 120. Yeah. So everyone was born in a different one of these years. This is why 60 is kind of the Chinese century, because then you will have lived through one of each of these animals, each of the elements and animals, but not each of the yin and yang permutations of them.
But you will have lived through each of the permutations of the animal.
Right.
If you live to 128, though, you get to do it all.
Yeah, 120
Good luck.
and you've got the whole thing. Maybe that's argument for what the true human lifespan is. I don't know.
Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. So yang water tiger year.
Very different from the metal tiger year, which we had last time. This is, again, yang, so it's going to have more of an outward push. Tiger energy is very unpredictable. So my prediction is that the tiger year is unpredictable. Makes it easy for me. We could just stop talking now.
Okay.
But I could say more.
So the past couple years have not been exactly predictable. Are you saying we're going to get even more unpredictable?
It is possible
It is
that we
possible.
could get more unpredictable. Well, we've been immersed in an ox year. And so, I mean, I know that there have been a lot of crazy things happening, but we have been plodding through with this new normal everyone keeps talking about, right? Haven't you heard the phrase new normal a million times?
I never want to hear that word again.
How very ox, this new normal idea. So tiger in general, tiger is very volatile. So volatile, unpredictable energy is like the noun. But this is a water tiger year. So water, same like in Chinese medicine. Think about kidney qi. Think about the quality of kidney qi that relates to that felt sense of unknowably bottomless, like the depths of the ocean, where you just can't find the bottom of it. Same way you can't find the origin of your ancestry. It just keeps going back and back and back and back and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So deep is the modifier for the volatile, unpredictable tiger energy this year. It's an energetic year. It's a strong year.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Anything in particular that would help someone to prepare, or is that based more on the kind of person you might be? Horses would have a different sense of this year than, say, roosters.
Both and. I mean, we're all immersed in this tiger energy, so we all have to try to understand a little bit about what that is. I want to stay with the water part of it just for another moment. Anytime you apply the water element to any of the 12 animals, you get this incredibly profoundly permeating experience of depth and breadth. So anytime there's a water animal, that quality of the animal, that character that character of the chi is gonna touch everything.
Because water goes everywhere.
Right, because water touches everything. So we'll have access to that. No matter what animal we are, we'll have access to that quality, which is very beautiful. It's really a beautiful opportunity. And it goes beyond good and bad, attachment and aversion, you know?
Tell me more about the beauty of this opportunity of a water tiger.
Well, tigers are world bridgers. They're very visceral. Tiger defines itself based on itself. It doesn't really need to understand the experience of other animals. It's not an animal of the barnyard. It's an animal, it's kind of like, you know, tigers and dragons tend to stand out. I would maybe add snakes to that. Tigers and dragons and snakes, they're not normal. They don't relate to other animals as well. And so tiger doesn't need to define itself according to what's normal or for other animals. So there's really no comparison. And so this brings an incredible strength to the tiger. It's like the tiger's so visceral. If there's a feeling of doing this, it'll do this, even if it seems crazy. It doesn't care about crazy. It's not factoring it in. It just feels like it needs to go this way. And it goes that way with tremendous strength and power. The Chinese idea of the tiger used in Polestar is talking about the main human predator that the Chinese faced
Mm-hmm.
throughout history. I mean, the Han Dynasty, they almost wiped out almost all of them. These were really, really big, scary animals. So we're going to be dealing with really, really big energy. Is it scary or not?
Well, you just said something. There's an aspect of the tiger that is also predator.
Yeah. I'm going to say like it's big movements, big movements.
There's no halfway measure with a tiger.
Uh, there's not a halfway measure, but there is like an on off.
Mm.
So, and that's actually important for understanding and important for helping feel okay within this year. And it is going to be different for everybody, depending on the animal that you are, because it can be really depleting for some animals. But there's an on off kind of thing, like the black stripe Ming would talk about, black stripe and the orange stripe. So tiger energy is very charismatic, very big, very boom, huge, tremendous energy out of nowhere, making a huge change. But then the black stripe indicates a need for periodic rest, periodic retreat, like a complete opportunity to lie down. So tigers can really only be taken down by their own exhaustion or their own incompetence, meaning like carelessness. So none of the other animals can hurt the tiger, but like think about Aesop's Androcles and the lion. The thorn can penetrate the paw. Something minuscule can have a devastating effect for the tiger and can just like knock them out, right? And that's a sense of carelessness from not respecting the black stripe. So we'll all need to know when to rest and conserve
Mm-hmm.
and know when to engage. The tiger symbol is also related to, we think of the Taoist masters like Zhang Daoling, who was famously depicted as riding the tiger. And Ming was very careful to teach that this meant that he was okay with the uncontrollable qi quality, not because he was stronger than the uncontrollable qi quality, not because he was controlling it. Then it wouldn't be tiger anymore. If it could be controlled, it wouldn't be tiger qi. It would be something else. So there's just an uncontrollable nature of it. And then the lesson from that tends to be, well, is this scary or not? And then what is fear?
Mm.
Are fearful circumstances like always so bad, or do they transform quickly like that whirling chi ball we were talking about before?
So it's very dynamic and very powerful.
Very dynamic. Yeah.
With periods of rest. And there will be moments of quietude in that.
Mm-hmm. And new opportunities coming up from those changes. And that's the riding the uncontrolled energy.
Okay.
And then the black stripe is also about committing to the daily practices that help us stay in touch with what's beneath those vicissitudes of life.
Mm-hmm.
Ritual activity, for instance, which helps us understand ourselves in relation to that volatile, changeable energy, the uncontrolled energies of the upper and the lower, and harmonize those.
Yeah. Are there any animals, and this is a very sort of broad brushstroke question, if it doesn't fit, we can just pass. Are there any animals in particular that tend to be kind of benefited by a tiger year? Some unique opportunities for them, or likewise certain animals that you need to be a little bit more careful this year?
There are definitely. Horses do great because they love to work. Let's see. It'd probably be easier to just go through them.
Okay, let's do.
One by one. But first, why don't we take a moment to understand what the water tiger year is, to understand that it might be useful to look at like what happened in the last water tiger year.
Ooh, great idea. When was the last water tiger year?
The last water tiger year was 1962. This was a yin water tiger year. The yang one was, I guess, 1902. And that was a year where we had like a lot of huge leaps. Space exploration was huge. That was the year that John Glenn orbited the Earth, the first American to orbit the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But not just that. See, this is where it really gets tigery. We tend to remember in history like the great moments or, but also I didn't know this until I started to look at this a little bit in preparation for thinking about tiger stuff. NASA launched and crashed one spacecraft. And you know how expensive each one of these things are, right? I mean, that's a tremendous amount of energy output to just have it crash on the surface of the moon. And then there was another one that they launched, which they missed and they lost it. It went into heliocentric orbit instead of lunar orbit.
Oops.
I know, right? There was the Cuban Missile Crisis, all kinds of changes relating to humanitarian issues, like the UN condemned South African apartheid for the first time. That was a big deal.
In 1962.
Yep. Also, there were like a good 5 to 6 countries that achieved independence from colonial rule. Big changes in the way that we do life, like Kmart and Walmart are water tigers. That's when they happened. And let's see, there were really big storms, which nowadays we hear about all the time, but there were storms that got names. Like there was one called the Columbus Day storm, which hit the Pacific Northwest. Germany had huge flooding that was very abnormal in these pre-climate change moments. The Beatles got signed, even though they were just babies. In art, protest music, books of protest, change-inspiring kinds of activity in the public sphere. Like James Baldwin was writing, Rachel Carson was advocating for environmental protections. Anne Sexton was writing. So there was like giving voice to deeper, right? The water element, giving voice to those deeper experiences and different experiences.
I can see how our current moment is reflective.
Yeah. Famous tigers would be like Queen Elizabeth II and Beethoven and Marco Polo, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu, who was one of my teachers and Ming's, Lady Gaga.
Oh, she's a tiger.
Fidel Castro.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, you can just feel it. She's fearless, not afraid to reinvent herself. And Jonas Salk, David Attenborough. Now, those are just tigers, but like famous water tigers would be like Jim Carrey is a good example. Like you think you know what an actor is, and then you see Jim Carrey, and you're like, okay, that's really different. Steve Irwin, okay, you think you know what a naturalist and TV celebrity is. It's like, talk about bridging worlds, right? Like I'm going to go in with those crocodiles or alligators.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Lindbergh, a whole slew of mobsters were water tigers born in 1902. Ayatollah Khomeini. So
yeah, okay. I'm getting a feel for it. So could we take a moment and go through just a quick glimpse at what each of the other animals, wild and barnyard, might experience?
Sure.
Or at least be on the lookout for?
Sure. This is usually everybody's favorite part because you get to think about, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for me? Right?
Of course. Yeah. We're all sitting here on pins and needles.
Okay. So we'll start at the beginning. The rat is the first animal. Rats like to take things apart, even big things. Tiger energy is very, very big and consuming. Rats can't really even compute what that scale even is. So it's an uncompatible year for the rat, but since they don't really understand that it's not really that dangerous, it's not going to necessarily hurt them. They just won't really know how to harmonize with it. So, it's a different scale.
So it's kind of beyond their ken in a way.
So it's just unfamiliar. Let's see. Next would be ox. Oxen are so resilient. They're so big. I mean, they're just a body of so much muscle. And oxen like to just plod along and keep doing what they're doing. They're so persistent. You can't out persistent an ox. So they kind of like don't even really care whether it's ox year or some other year, because they just do what they do, which is continue to plod forward one foot and step, in front of the other, which is what we've all been in.
Mm-hmm.
Their marker is predictability. So this will be an unpredictable year, but they might not even notice.
They're just plodding along.
Not the worst. Yeah. Now, tigers need to use caution. Any animal needs to use caution in its year. Any animal in its own year is going to have the benefit of having the outer chi match the inner chi. And so they can usually get a lot done and might feel pushed to the edge, but they're quite capable in that environment because it's harmonious. That being said, tigers, we know they have to rest and respect their black stripe. This is a water tiger year, which of course we know in Chinese medicine relates to winter. So we can all expect winter to be the time that things come to fruition, that things resolve. So the native element of tiger is wood. So there will be a lot of like antsy springtime, let's get out there and do things energy for all of us in the tiger year because of that native wood energy. But it's good advice for all of us to sort of hang out and wait and play the long game, tigers in particular. So caution in the beginning, in the middle of the year, things come to fruition in the winter. I think that the last tiger year that we had, which was metal tiger, may have been more dangerous for the tiger because of wood because of metal in relation to wood on the 5 element cycle. So this is a water element, so it's kind of mother element,
More generative for the tiger.
more generative. But we also know that water is a time when things kind of resolve and come completely apart. Right? So for tigers and for all of us, there's this sense of, okay, if we're going to harmonize with this big water energy, then we have to get really, really big in our view. So wait and rest and retreat are good water element things to do, and just take it easy in the springtime.
Okay. Respect that black stripe.
Yeah. Rabbits. This is the hard one. The next year is for you, rabbit. Just try to make it there. It's so big and scary for rabbits. Rabbits' strength is networking. So do that. Like hide, know who your family is, know who your friends are, network, hunker down, wait, be careful, tend to your health. Dragons have big energy like the tiger, but it's different because they're of the sky. Tigers are like so muscular. Like, tigers will take two completely different worlds and be able to smush them together and make a new thing. Dragons can be generative in that way, but it's because they're in touch with this large, like, sky vision. Their vision encompasses a broad view. So dragons are kind of like, hey, I don't understand why we're being so visceral. I don't understand why we're muscling things so much. Can't we just zoom out? So dragons might not like it for that reason, but it's not dangerous to them. They're just disoriented a little bit.
And it sounds like dragons, because they can zoom out, they've got a perspective on the situation.
Yeah, on every situation. Ming used to laugh whenever we'd get to the dragon part of a discussion of a year, because he'd say, okay, did any of you even come? You don't need any information. Because dragons are a supernatural animal. They're a composite animal of all the other different ones. The scales of the snake and the wings of the rooster and the claws of the tiger, the brawn of the ox and the agility of the horse. So they kind of already get all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Snake. Well, tigers are so, like I say, visceral and daring that the changes in the uncontrolled, unpredictable energies come from like an immediate kind of impulse, an immediate, this is happening, boom, huge reaction. This is very different from snake energy. Snakes like to hide. They like to disappear. When a snake needs to hunt, it will wait and watch and wait and watch and wait and watch and then act very powerfully. Tigers like to hide in the tall grass too, but they're functioning in just a different kind of way. They're enormous. It's just different. So snakes, just keep hiding. You're really good at it. It can be difficult if they don't. Horses are able to take this in stride. They're so strong. They're muscle bound like the ox, but unlike the ox, they don't plod in the same direction. They're very flexible. They're very agile, and they're ready to work on whatever's coming up, whether it's good fortune or adversity. So they love to overwork. So tiger's energy, even though it's bigger than the rest of the barnyard, which is where the horse lives, it's still okay for them.
So horses can use that energy to some degree. They're flexible and adaptable and agile. I heard you use the word agile with the horse.
Yeah. They'll be able to just look at what's happening and go, okay, this is horribly destructive, so let's fix it. Or, oh, this is so awesome. We made a huge improvement. So now we know what to do.
All right, so those practical horse people will be helpful in getting us through this.
Yeah, it's practical.
Mm-hmm.
Next is goat. So the goat has brought a lot of change and even success for the last couple years for goats. So it's important for goats to remember that that's related to the last couple years. And so it's not going to keep dramatically changing for them, or not in a willful way. Like the external circumstances may change things for them, as it will for all of us because of the uncontrolled nature of tiger. But goats just need to stay steady with what they've recently figured out over the past couple of years and stick with it, and they'll do well. I mean, goats are kind of prey animals, not as much as monkeys, but they know how to work with what they've just accomplished and can keep refining that and just stick with that.
Okay. Keep doing what you're doing, goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Monkey. Whew. So the monkey understands itself by playing at what it isn't. You know, the monkey is the great mimic. Monkeys love to act like this, act like that, climb up into the tree and call like a bird, dip down and tease the crocodile or the alligator down in the water. Here I am. They disorient others, and it's a big joke for the monkey. But tiger energy is more blunt and straightforward. Tigers are so strong that they don't really need to manipulate or hide what they are or why they're doing it. They're so independent that they don't really care if you disagree. They don't care. They don't feel like they need to provide their reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. They just do it. And tiger also lacks that predictable baseline that the monkey operates its discovery process on. So monkey feels really destabilized in a tiger year.
Mm-hmm. So be careful with your antics.
Yeah, tigers eat monkeys.
Tigers eat monkeys.
Yeah. So just take things lightly, I think would be the main thing to do for tigers. Whatever you're working on, don't try to set it up as the brand new big grand thing that's going to stick. Like just let it be more light play, because that can kind of protect the monkey from the extreme disappointment of things not working out. Practice detachment. If you're going to do something, do it and be willing for it to change, be willing for it to not stick.
Mm-hmm. Not a great year for great big new grand schemes.
Not ones you're attached to. I mean, there are other kinds of great big grand schemes that could be great for a monkey, like travel, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you're just taking it day by day.
Okay, thanks for that distinction. That's helpful.
Rooster is a very different energy from tiger, but it's complementary. Boy, some of my most interesting clients.
Complementary to tiger.
Well, yeah, because you think like tiger crane mythology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Rooster doesn't really mean rooster. Rooster means bird.
Mm-hmm.
It means...
Or sometimes phoenix.
Crane.
Yeah.
Actually, he said not...
He said not
he
so much?
Specifically said not
not
this
phoenix.
Redefining itself phoenix thing. That's not what the Chinese meant. It's more of like that bird energy. It's about the beak and the precision. You know, it's about this tiny body underneath all these big feathers that make it look really big and grand, and this desire to like tell you about it, cock-a-doodle-doo, you know, and this ability to look at all of the sand and dirt in the yard and go, that exact one little pebble, that's the one I want in my gullet. It's going to make me feel so great, digest so well. You know, the rooster bird energy has a very discriminating ability. And that's also how it fights, like cockfights. They know just where to get in, timing. You know, that's intelligence. So tiger year has strength that the rooster doesn't have, but it has precision and grace that the tiger doesn't have. So rooster can take that heavy quality of tiger and bring lightness. The rooster will be okay.
Okay. Sounds like it would be beneficial for rooster in a way. It's some gas in the tank.
Yeah. Dog. So dogs are the loyalty figure in a very predictable realm, a very predictable barnyard realm. And the tiger is not controllable or predictable. So dogs feel very confused by that energy. Yeah.
So it'll be a challenging year for dogs. They should get with their pack and whatever support that they've got, lean on that.
Dogs do need to know who or what they're loyal to, whether it's family or whether it's a particular view or philosophy or group. That's where dogs are going to find strength.
So know your loyalties and lean on them this year.
Because the year won't be loyal back. It's not a good year for predictable returns. But it's not all tragedy,
No.
So pig is very pleasure driven. We're not talking about the gluttonous image that our society teaches. Think strong, think like boar. So pigs are strong, almost as strong as the tiger in some ways. They can show us how to appreciate the little things through this year. So even if there's something devastating going on, which seems like these days, I mean, even here we are in ox year, something devastating every year, the pigs will, or every other day, the pigs will remind us how to just kind of sit down and enjoy dinner. Sit down and appreciate the view from the window.
So if you've got a friend who's a pig, make sure that you're hanging with that friend a bit. They'll help keep you sort of centered and grounded and appreciative.
Yeah. Pigs can be sort of surface in that way in comparison to maybe some of the other animals, like the intuitiveness of the rabbit or the intellectual refinement of the rooster. But it's really quite a deep teaching that the pig offers us.
I don't know, after the past year or so, I think having a few more pigs in my life might be a good idea. All right. Well, Anne, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts on the upcoming tiger year and what all us different critters might expect from that. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we wind it down for today?
I'm just grateful to be here. And I think that the key for all of these animals in this next year is really going to be relaxation. And relaxation can look different ways for different animals. Relaxation can look like different activities. Sometimes the best rest is a change of activity, but finding the way to flow with these various energies is the key.
Okay. And we're going to have plenty of different and wild energies with the tiger. So good thing it's water, right? Water inherently wants to flow anyway. We can lean on that a little bit, can't we?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you so much for your time today. And I have a kabillion more questions about Polestar, but maybe we can take that offline at some point, or I could ask you about that. Do you do consultations for people with this? Is this part of your work?
I do. I do natal astrology readings and also progressions to look at the changing factors year by year and decade by decade, in addition to my acupuncture practice. So I have Polestar clients all over the world, and some of my acupuncture patients utilize it as well. It's a great tool.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to get all your contact information. We'll put it up on the website. Y'all can go to the show notes page and get in touch with Anne if you're interested. Again, thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic tiger year.
Thank you. Same to you, Michael.
After the podcast conversation, Anne and I talked a bit more, and I'd like to share some more of her thoughts concerning fear in the tiger year. The enormity of the tiger year, especially a water element one, cannot be overstated. Although we have discussed the ways that the chi of this year may be daunting, the Polestar Astrology teaching is very clear. Revolutionary change, or even catastrophe, can be a wonderful opportunity. Few would contest that being charged by a big cat is terrifying. However, Polestar Astrology teaches that catastrophic, uncontrolled energies provide opportunities that go beyond our habituated responses. The chi of the tiger year is suffused with this type of unusual, uncontrolled energy. We can access that and use it. Is the tiger year scary? Yeah, maybe sometimes. And that's okay, especially for some of the characters of the Chinese zodiac. But it is important to remember that fear is not the only available response to the chi of the year. Habituated emotional responses, such as negativity, are subtle choices that we make because we unconsciously believe we are gaining something from them. In a tiger year, we can interrupt that pattern. Externally, we can accept the uncontrollable nature of the world around us, the way Taoist masters like Zhang Daoling demonstrated. Internally, we can set our inner compass to true north with our personal cultivation practices like meditation, self-care, and study. Together, these two approaches can drop us into a state of grounded spontaneity with which we will be well prepared to utilize the tiger year. I got to tell you, I got a pal in Taiwan who's a Swanming Shensheng. He's a fortune teller, as they would say there, but his forte is not telling the future, but rather, to some degree, seeing how the past is unfolding in the present. I thought about him when Anne said that character dictates how someone meets their destiny. And that makes me think, too, about sailing and how you are constantly meeting waves as you go. The steadiness or wobble has to do with how you meet and steer through each wave. The waves are endless. How we approach them does indeed make all the difference. All right, friends, I hope you all have a healthy and prosperous year of the tiger. If you need to dial up some fierceness, well, it's all around us, so dip in. I'm thinking this tiger year could help put some wind in the sails of some projects that I've had simmering. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.